guys, welcome back to the homestead. So today we're actually going to make a huge pot of chili so we can have it for dinner, but I'm also going to take most of that and go ahead and can it up so you guys will see that process. So people have it for lunches, easy meals, and stuff like that, right? So I always do really large batches of stuff and then can the extras so that way we've got, nights you don't feel like cooking, or you're sick, or you're just tired of everything, you can open up a can, warm it up, and have an easy dinner. So what I have in my pot here, I have my meat already browning with the seasons for my chili. Back here, I have my kidney beans in the quick soak method, where I boiled them for a half hour, and then I let them sit for an hour in that fluid so they'll soften up. And I've started chopping up my onions and my bell peppers. And what I do, I actually cut these white fleshy parts out and make sure that they don't end up in what I'm going to can. If I was just going to make a big pot of chili and eat it, it wouldn't bother me. But these little white fleshy parts, they don't taste very good after you've canned them. So in here I've got red bell peppers, onions, and I'm about to add a yellow bell pepper to it. And then once this has finished browning back here, we'll add in our tomatoes and throw it all together. So the good thing is, you can take any chili recipe that you have and can it up as long as it's safe to can. And safe to can determines on how you feel about canning. I know there's a lot of rebel canners out there, and while I do some rebel canning myself, I would never recommend anybody that's new to canning to just jump off and rebel can until you're fully aware and understand how the canning process works. The more you start to play with things, the more you can open yourself up. I've canned milk, I've canned a whole bunch of things, but once you get that familiarity with it, you can do it. But I would highly recommend doing tried and true recipes, get you a nice canning book, and trying it, absolutely trying it, and see what you like. And make meals that you like. If you do stroganoff and you like stroganoff, then you can can your meat base and your juices, but leave the flour out, right? You can add that later when you decide to go and make your noodles and do all that stuff with it. So I'm gonna finish chopping this up. Once I get the chili all made and canned up, then I'm going to finish up with my homemade cornbread in a pan recipe. So that'll be fun for you guys too. So let me finish this up and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm trying to get you a good shot of what I've got going on in the pot. Unfortunately, my hood vent always gets in the way. So what I have done is I've gone ahead and browned my meat up. I've turned my heat back so it doesn't burn, because you don't want to dry your meat out too much. You'll notice that I cut everything up really small. When I can it, I prefer to cut it small so I get more of the good stuff in the jars. A lot of people don't like the texture of ground beef when it's canned, but I know personally myself, it's usually because I canned it with water, which is disgusting. So if you're going to can ground beef, then make sure you put a broth with it, or something else. And you always want to cook your ground beef so that way it stays separated, because if you just throw a bunch of ground beef in a mason jar and can it, well, it's going to come out like the most disgusting meatloaf you've ever had in your entire life. So now I've added the onions, the pepper, and the garlic to my meat. And again, you don't have to use my recipe, you can use your own recipe. My beans they just finished, ironically. Talk about timing it perfectly. So now I'm going to take my beans and I'm going to drain them in the sink, and you'll see me dump those in. And like I said, you're going to want to do that process for the quick beans. Now, if you have your life together better than I have my life together, then you will probably soak them overnight. I can never seem to plan that out right, so I always have to use the quick method. And then we'll just stir those in. I prefer my chilies to be more hearty, less saucy. And I don't add my spicy peppers and stuff like that in when I make it, because especially if I'm going to can it, because in the canning process, the heat in those peppers sometimes intensifies, and you'll open it up and pretty much set yourself on fire. And I don't have a high tolerance to spice, but everybody else does. Now I'm adding my crushed tomatoes. And yes, I have canned from the store organic non-GMO tomatoes because, well, I didn't get much of a tomato crop this year, so couldn't put any up, which was kind of terrible. And I'll put the full recipe below for you guys of what I do. And again, it's your kitchen. You can play with it how you want to. And I already added a lot of my seasoning to my meat when I was cooking it. But I'll let this cook down for a little bit. Probably add a little water to it because this is super thick. But then I'll come back and test it to see how the taste is. So like I said, I'm going to add probably a little water because that's super thick. Again, I'm using distilled. Now, for the canning process, for what I'm going to put away, I'm probably going to let this kind of cook and infuse together for about 30 minutes. Because a lot of the flavors and stuff will fuse together in the canning process itself. But we'll let this sit and we'll be back. Alright guys, so this has been cooking for about a half hour now. Like I said, I'm not trying to cook it all the way through because I don't want to over process it. Now once I take out what I'm going to can and then leave the rest for dinner, right, I'll let that just kind of slow simmer until close to dinner time. But yeah, we're just going to start by filling up our jars. And I really just kind of want to show you this process and remind you, like, there's so many things that we do just over and over and over again. And I know a lot of people who are scared of canning because it seems like too much, right? Because there is a lot of mixed information out there, bunch of different processes. That's why I say get a book, stick with that book until you get better at what you're doing and more experienced. But again, we're just going to do the same process, right? Hot process jars, hot canner, hot soup, hot chili, whatever we're making. So we start to see the patterns, right? And the patterns teach us not to be afraid. We're going to leave about inch headspace on these. And if you get a decent book, it'll tell you the different headspaces for your different products. Some are half, some are quarter, some are inch headspace. And it's just to prevent the siphoning and those issues. So we're going to get these all filled up. Now you can, right, if you're really like, I don't like the texture of canned meat, you can just, do you a vegetarian chili, right, with your vegetables and your beans, and then have that sitting on your shelf, and then you can fry your meat up later. But for me, my purpose for this, right, is to get healthy lunches. Saves money in the long run, and I know what everybody's eating, which is always beneficial too. You just heat it up, throw it in a thermos, and go for the day. So let me get these filled up, and we'll put them in the canner. I think we should get to 18 if my brain's remembering correctly in the canner. we'll be back. All right, so this is my second batch to go in the canner. And remember, we're going to wipe our lids, or wipe the tops, but you're going to move it around to make sure there's no air bubbles. Right? If you watch the other canning videos, you're starting to see, again, like I said, the patterns, right? And we just take our towel, run around the top, make sure there's nothing that's going to get between our lid and the top of our jar to keep it from sealing. We'll get the top put on these and get these in the can. Okay, so we've got all our cans in our canner, and we're going to take, like we did before in our last canning videos, put a little olive oil on the rim of our canner, right? So we'll be able to get it back off. I mean, if you've got a lot of upper body strength, you might not have to do it, but I do. So then again, depending on how your canner works, mine, of course, I've got my digit with my arrow with my canner. Put it into place, around, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Yep. And then we start doing opposites to tighten this down. Try not to burn our fingers the whole time. Like I said, I just get it enough to where it's starting to get tight, and then I go back and like really clamp them down. So that way the top, excuse me, the top of my canner is even. Some of them wound way up than others. So the last one I put tight, and then I go around to do them all. So just as previously before, because we are pressure canning, we're now going to let this sit. Our temperature is at medium, and we're going to wait for the steam to start coming out of this very nicely at the top, and then we will find our weight and we'll put our weight on. So when it gets to that point, we'll come back. All right, guys, we're back, and this steam has now been venting for the 10 minutes. So I'm going to find the 15 on my weight, and I'm going to put it on, and we're going to wait for this to build up to 15 pounds pressure for this type of canner. We're processing pint chili, right? Because there's meat in ours. We're going to go 75 minutes. So we're going to let this build up. When it gets to 15 pounds pressure and holds there for a minute and a half. Like I said, we're going to do our temp around medium, right? So we don't have to babysit this the whole time. If you've watched the other canning videos, you want to actually have it build up slow, right? The slower that it builds up, the less that you have to babysit it, and you can get it right at that 15, and you can you can just let it sit for the full time. We'll put a timer on once we get to 15, and then we'll just sit here and kind of watch it. Sorry, guys. I actually have 6 batches of soap going currently, and when this gets towards the end, we'll come back. I've got my chili, what's left over for dinner, and another pot over here, and we'll make that cornbread to go with it, and we'll finish everything up. All right, guys, so we're back, and our stuff is canning. You'll hear the canner tick from time to time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to throw our cornbread together. I've got my oven preheated to 450. I'll put the full recipe below for you guys. But all I have in this bowl is all my dry mix, which is like my flour, my cornmeal, baking powder, baking soda, salt, you know, all the normals. I have in here, I have buttermilk, an egg. We got buttermilk, an egg, regular milk. Yeah, and I think that's it. That's everything here. But like I said, I'll put the full recipe below. And I have mixed all my dry ingredients together. And now I'm going to pour in my wet ingredients. Oh, there's butter in there too. Of course there's butter in there. There's butter in everything. And we're just going to mix this up. Over here, we're going to preheat our pan. Once our pan is good and hot, you see it smoking, and before the butter starts to burn, you want to pour your cornmeal into your pan. You want to hear that sizzle. Very hard to do this backwards, guys. Whee! Just going to push it around the pan. And you want it to cook on the stovetop for about a minute. And then we'll put it in the oven. Good thing I already have a timer going. Alright, so this has been cooking for about a minute, and we're going to take it, put it in our 450-degree oven, and we're going to let it cook for about 20 minutes. We'll check it then. Alright, so it's been 20 minutes. Just pull that out. You see, we've gone until it's a nice golden brown and it's pulled away from the edges nicely. So we're just going to let this sit and cool, and it'll go great with our chili tonight. Alright guys, we're back. This has fully cooked. So it went its full 75 minutes, and now I've allowed it to I've allowed it to just rest until it's depressurized itself. We're going to pull our weight off and then let the little bit of last pressure left vent out. Just as before, we take it apart the same way we put it together. Opposites. Whee. See how nice that olive oil is? Don't see any broken jars, so that's good news. there we go. Lots of easy, ready to go lunches and dinner. Just as we have every other time, we're going to let these sit, and they're going to sit on our counter for 12 to 24 hours before we take the rings off and let them rest. Our cornbread came out very nicely to go with our chili tonight, and there's plenty left over to pack for hubby's lunch. I'm glad you guys stopped by. Hope you enjoyed this. I'm beat. I'm going to go eat my dinner. Y'all have a great night.